Hi everyone, welcome to our session on the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll start, and so again, welcome, and we'll just start with the presentation. So today's topic is the great year and the recent avatars. So of course, the recent avatars are not that recent, but the whole idea is that they are quite recent. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so this is something that has been taken from, of course, we are referring to the Bhagavad Gita. We are still studying the context of the Bhagavad Gita. So the Mahabharata, so to say, takes place before Kali Yuga. So if you look at the bottom of the screen over here in the gray portion, it says Kali Yuga. So, if you can see, Kali Yuga is quite short compared to, let's say, Satyug. If you can just see here on top, the Satyug cycle is quite big. Now, this whole cycle is 24,000 years. And and during the great cycle, what happens is that we are under the influence of certain constellations. Like, we know that there are 12 constellations in the zodiac, and we are under the influence of each zodiac for about 200 years. So when did the Mahabharata take place? Probably somewhere around, 900 BC, probably somewhere around here. Okay, from what I can tell in the chart. Okay, moving on. So this was basically, and around 900 BC, which is after the Mahabharata, Maharaj Yudhishthir gave the throne to Parikshit, who was the great grandson of Arjun, son of Abhimanyu, and he left for the Himalayas. Now, the great year is a concept that was developed by Sri Yukteswar Giri, and this is a photograph of Sri Yukteswar Giri with Yogananda Paramhansji, who is the author of the book God Talks with Arjuna. So this is a diagram of the great year. So when the great year starts, it's like 24,000 years the cycle moves around. So, sometimes if people say that, okay, Kali Yuga is over and that's it. Well, that's it for several thousand years. But again, because it's a great year, because it's a cycle, it's going to come again. Okay. So this is again a diagram from the book, The Existence of God is Self-Evident by Master Chow-Kok Sui. So over here, if you can see, at the end of at the end of, sorry, just the orientation is off. Okay, so somewhere around here is when the Mahabharata takes place. Okay, this is 499 AD, which means that this is the lowest point of the Kali Yuga, which basically means that in 500 AD, that is when things began to go really, really off with the planet and with the people, because most people were, the influence was in the Kali Yuga, at the bottommost part of the Kali Yuga. So that is when people could not comprehend things like energy. People were just mostly into, material things, into physical things, because the concept was not there of things that are of a higher nature. But then as we move out of Kali Yuga and we move towards the higher yugs, now this is Satyug. So Satyug is the golden period. So the Satyug is when we are very close to the center of the galaxy and close to the sun. Okay. Okay, so why are we discussing this? We're discussing this in the context of the Bhagavad Gita. We're discussing this in the context of, the various stories that we hear. So Krishna, so to say, was apparently born or was on the planet between 900 to 700 before Christ. And so was Moses. Now, both of these people, the avatar Krishna as well as Moses, were divinely ordained, which means that their mothers knew that the child that is going to be born is going to be a divine child. Okay. And also, they both came with divine missions. They both escaped what are called death decrees to all male infants born in that period. So if you remember the story of Krishna and Kans, Kans was his mama, and he had ordered that all male children born during that period where Krishna actually escaped. Radha Vasudev was able to help Krishna escape and go to Mathura. He had ordered that all male children be killed. And it's the same for Moses also. That time, I think it was the Egyptian pharaoh who ordered all male children to be killed, and they both escaped. Now, the main thing that I want to talk about here is the stories of the parting of the waters. So in both cases, we hear about two stories of the parting of the waters. So we'll just talk about that. So when Krishna was born, Lord Krishna was born, apparently his parents were in a jail cell. And when he was born, the fetters of his parents broke and the doors of the prison opened, and Vasudev was able to carry Krishna across the Yamuna to his friend's place and leave him there for safekeeping. Okay. And with Moses, we hear about the story of him parting the waters and letting the people pass through to escape from Egypt, right? Now, again, I'll just come to why we're talking about this. Now, this is another view that has also been proposed in this book called Common Prophets. This is by Dr. Bharat Jhunjhunwala, where he talks about the fact that possibly the Jewish, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Hindus all have a common prophet, all have a common root. Why does he come up with this? He says that there are Hindus, and there are names of the Manus, for example. So the Manu is somebody who creates a race, who gives the seed to the race. Okay, and the beauty is that it seems that a lot of these individuals all sort of came from the same region, okay, around the Caspian Sea. Now, this is an interesting one. This is a genealogy of Krishna and Moses. It's by Dr. Bharat Jhunjhunwala. So we'll start from the bottom. Around 1500 BCE, we have Moses and we have Krishna. And then if you trace back their lineage, so we have Adam, who is believed to be the father of, I guess, the starting father. And in the Hindu tradition, we have what's called the Swayambhu Manu, which is over here. Now, around the same time, the Swayambhu Manu has three children, Vishwasan, Vricha, and Indra. And around 3200 BC, Adam has three sons, Seth, Abel, and Cain. Then we go down to 3000 BC, where again we have the Vaishvat Manu, and we have Noah, the stories of Noah. And we go further down. Now, this is obviously something that needs a lot of study, but what caught my eye was that, there's the word Dashrath over here, who is the father of Prince Ram or King Ram. And you also have this character by the name of Tera. Now, if you just look at the syllables, Tera and Dashrath sounds kind of similar. Then you have Abraham and you have Ram on the same kind of area. So here's Abraham, here's Ram, here's Sarah, Abraham's wife, and here's Sita. And if you look at the side, you have Lakshman and you have Abraham's brother Lot. Okay, and then of course we just go down the lineage. So why we again discussing about this is that there are other people who have done research on this, and I just thought I would share this with you because I find it quite interesting. Okay, so again, what is the purpose of discussing this? So when we are discussing the Bhagavad Gita, the main technique that we are going to talk about is inner reflection. So the first shloka of the Bhagavad Gita starts like this, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, and he's speaking to Sanjay, right? Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta Yuyutsavaha, Mama Kim Pandavascheva, Kim Kurvata, O Sanjaya. So he is asking his charioteer Sanjay that what did my 100 sons and what did the 5 Pandavas do today? Okay, and as we discussed in previous sessions, the 5 Pandavas are the sons of Pandu. They represent pure intelligence, and they also represent certain chakras. And the 100 Kauravas reflect our vices. So basically, the blind mind is asking, inner reflection is asking his discriminative mind, what did they do? So one of the things that I like about this is that basically it's like distancing ourselves. We are distancing ourselves from our actions and our thoughts. Okay, that's one way, because we're saying my Pandavas and my Kauravas, right? We're not saying that this is me. We are saying that they are mine, but they are not me. Okay, so just stay with me for a second. Now, what we are going to be aware of now is we're going to do some inner reflection. Now, today we'll focus on the emotional body because the story that we are talking about is the parting of the waters. So the question is, what did my emotions do today? So let's just be aware of our emotions. So, when the emotions are represented by water. Now, in the case of Moses, as well as in the case of Vasudev carrying Krishna across the water, if you remember, the waters were in spate. What that means is that the waters were were disturbed. The waters were very, very disturbed. Now, if you just think about it, when our emotions are very, very disturbed, and the emotions, like I said, are often represented by water in mythological stories, what we are basically saying is that my emotions are very, very, very disturbed. Now, what do I do? My, it's like going on in the mind. So wow, now what we're going to do is we're going to part the waters of the emotional body, and we are going to let the Krishna consciousness or the Christ consciousness come through. Okay, what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to calm down the emotional body, at least for a certain period of time. Even if we can't calm down the emotional body, it's also a way of just pushing it all aside and saying, I am the soul. I am the Krishna consciousness. I am, Moses and all these people who are going to go through. Now, obviously, we're not going to become Krishna conscious overnight, but it's a practice. The beauty in the Pranic Healing School is that we practice something called the soul affirmation, which basically says, I am not the body, I am not the emotions, I am not the thought. So today we're going to focus on the emotions. Okay, so now here's what I would like us to do. We imagine, so whichever story is more appealing to you, you can just think of that story. You're aware of your body. You're aware of all the emotions that are there in the body, creating a big churn, like the spate in the Yamuna, or, the Red Sea is disturbed and there's a storm and there's all kind of things happening, blah, 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 blah. And then we just sit down and we say, I am not the emotions. I am not the emotions. I am the soul. So just let's close our eyes. Let's be aware that there is the emotional body, and we are slowly parting the waters, which means we are creating a little space in that emotional body, and we are letting the Krishna consciousness come in through our body, through our mind, and through our emotions. And we are going to use the soul affirmation, I am not the emotions. I am not the thoughts. So as we are doing this reflection, let's also be aware of what is the emotion that is disturbing us. What is causing the waters of our body to be upset? Let's just be aware of that. And then specifically for ourselves, let us say, I am not this particular emotion. I am the soul. I am not the body. I am not the emotions. I am not the thought. I am the soul. Inhale slowly. Exhale slowly. Inhale slowly. Exhale slowly. Okay. So what was the purpose of doing this whole exercise is inner reflection. So the Bhagavad Gita, the first shloka, like I said, it talks about inner reflection. So what we want to do is we want to be aware of what are the things that we did, or rather the chakras did, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, what did they do today? And let's be aware of what we want to change. Because we can read about the Bhagavad Gita, we can understand the Bhagavad Gita at the story level, but my purpose here is to help us to be aware of how many times, in how many ways, through stories, through mythology, the sages have tried to make us aware of how to practice inner reflection. What is inner reflection? It's the ability to calm down the emotional body, part the waters, let the Krishna consciousness come in. Okay, and that is what will give us the, gradually as we keep practicing this, it makes us more and more and more soul conscious. And then when we are more and more soul conscious, then we can do things in a better way. Okay, so going back. Okay, so the stories again of Krishna and Moses, the story again is about the fact that they were divinely conceived. So the question is, aren't we also divinely conceived? We are all part of God, right? We are all here with our own mission. Okay, we all have a mission. We all have a purpose in life. The difference between us and some of these evolved souls is that when they are born, they are fully aware of their divine mission. For some of us, we have to develop an awareness of our mission on the planet. So that is something that we can do. And how can we be helped by that? We can be helped by that by inner reflection, by being aware of what disturbs us, what calms us down. Can be the soul affirmation. Obviously there's meditation. And you know, so it becomes like a practice, right? Now, we also wanted to talk about why some of the avatars are shown in the blue color. So they're shown in the blue color because, going back to the great year, the blue color represents, the mental body. So when we talk about the blue color, we are basically talking about people who are mentally more evolved. Now, this may also have happened to us sometimes, is that when we are dreaming, we may have seen people who are blue in color. Okay, you may have seen your favorite god, or you may have even seen an animal, or just anybody. So one of the understandings is that if you see a blue being in your meditation, or during your meditation, then basically perhaps it is your higher soul who is trying to get in touch with you, because the higher soul dwells at what's called the causal level. A part of it dwells at the causal level, and it sends information down to us. But it can only send information down to us when the waters are calm. So when the waters be calm, the waters will be calm when we part the waters and we let the Krishna consciousness come through. Okay, so I hope this is helping. What I'm trying to do is like put a lot of things together, so that whenever we look around, whenever we see something, whenever we hear a story, we are aware of why this is and what to do with it. So Lord Rama also was born in the higher mental age. So if you look at this diagram, he was born in the higher mental age. Here is the higher mental age, and that covers Gemini and Sagittarius. If you just see these two, again, Lord Rama is also sometimes shown as blue because he is also a mentally evolved person, and he also comes at the time of the higher mental age. Okay, so like I said, the mental body is kind of represented as blue in color. Okay, now and of course, if you remember that Lord Rama was a twin, he had twin brothers, and he himself gave, his wife gave birth to twins. And the other side, you have Sagittarius. So in Sagittarius, what happens is that the person carries a bow and arrow. Okay, so this is basically a way of representing that the avatars, when they come under the influence of a certain constellation. So in the case of Rama, he probably came under the influence of Gemini and Sagittarius. So that's here. Uske baad we have Krishna, who came under the influence of Taurus and Scorpio. So here we have Taurus and Scorpio. Why Taurus? Because Taurus represents the bull. And Krishna, as you remember, was a cowherd, right? So he would take care of cows. And Scorpio, because Krishna also represents the mastery of sexual energy. So in his book, Master Choa talks about the fact that when Raja Parikshit was questioning the character of Lord Krishna, the answer given was that even though he had many wives and gopis, he never lost a single drop of his semen when having sex. Lord Krishna was the avatar during the period of Taurus and Scorpio. He symbolizes the mastery of sexual energy, transforming sexual energy into spiritual energy to achieve oneness with God or God realization. Okay. Then after that, we have Aries. So here's Aries and Pisces. So here is where we believe this is the area in which Jesus had come. So Jesus, for example, was also called the fisher of men, and he also is represented as the lamb, right? So Aries represents the lamb in this case, and Pisces represents the fisher of men. So again, I feel that, again, the sages, in order to make sure that the information is not lost, they put it into certain stories. Again, these great avatars are born under the influence of certain constellations, so they bring that influence to us. So what? So what is that we are basically going to practice, the inner reflection. We are going to clear our emotional body so that the mission, so that the information can start flowing through us. We part the emotional bodies, we part the waters, we let Krishna consciousness come through. Okay, how do we do this? With inner reflection, because we don't want to repeat the same emotional error again. We may have made some emotional error at some point, but we don't want to repeat that error. So one way to do it is to do inner reflection, to be aware of what we did. So let's say we got angry at somebody. It's like, okay, I don't want to do this next time. Next time, I want to probably firmly and politely tell this person, listen, what you did wasn't right. It made me very angry. And you can say that in exactly this tone. Okay, you don't have to yell and scream when you're angry. You can just calmly tell people, listen, I'm angry. Okay, not with a smile necessarily, but at least you can say it firmly and politely, right? So some of us feel that only if we are, upset and we're screaming and yelling, that's when things are going to happen. No, not necessary. Because when you're screaming and yelling, it's like everything is up and down, and that's not going to help. The important thing is to calm down the waters. If you can't calm down the waters, at least separate them, create a path for God to come through, for Krishna consciousness to come through. And that can be done through inner reflection and through the soul affirmation. Okay, so let's do the invocation. Let's close our eyes, connect the tongue to the palate. Inhale slowly, exhale slowly. Let us invoke to the Supreme God. Divine Father, Divine Mother, we thank you for your priceless blessings, for divine light in the form of guidance, divine love, divine power. Thank you for your mercy, for love, for divine love, divine mercy. We thank you. I am that I am. I am not the body. I am not the emotions. So even if we have done something that is not great, we can just disassociate from it and say, I am not the emotions. I am going to create better emotions the next time the same situation comes my way. I am the soul. I am not the emotions. I am not the emotions that I have experienced. I am the soul. The emotions and the thoughts are products of the soul. I, the soul, am going to create better emotions with the right thought, with the right emotion, which will bring me to take the right action. I am that I am. I am the soul. Let us think of one thing that we did. So this is the blind mind Dhritarashtra asking Sanjay, impartial introspection. What did they do today? Let's think of one thing that we feel we could have done differently. Let's look at what we did. Now let's mentally erase it. And now let us create a new thought pattern, a new emotion that is more supportive. We can communicate calmly, gently, and firmly. Remember that detachment is not indifference. If someone is doing something that is hurting us or is harmful for themselves, it is our responsibility to communicate that to them in a gentle, kind way. And if we speak from our heart, they will listen. If we speak out of fear, they may sense the fear and they may not listen. So let us reflect that if we want others to change or if we want ourselves to change, why do we want that change? Is it for us? Is it for them? Let's take 30 seconds to do that. Erase the pattern that we don't want. You know, sometimes we don't know what the right thing to say is. That's okay. Just visualize some light coming in and giving us divine guidance as to how to handle the situation better in future. Okay. Gently return to your body. Let's bless ourselves with the ability to practice inner reflection, to be able to bring the Bhagavad Gita into our life. As we go through the stories and we go through the parables, we already know the stories. Now we're just going to connect them to the practice and develop our character and build our character. Let's bless ourselves with divine strength, love. Let's bless ourselves with kindness. Sometimes we are kind to others, but we forget to be kind to ourselves. Let's bless ourselves with kindness. Inhale slowly, exhale slowly. Let's bless our projects, our homes, our workplace, our buildings, our homes, our neighborhood, our city, our state, our country, our continent, our planet, the solar system, and the entire galaxy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining, and we will see you soon. I hope you enjoyed the session. If there are any particular questions that you have about the Bhagavad Gita, then you can perhaps text it to us. And what we'll try to do is we'll try to incorporate it in what we are doing already. Because, you know, the Bhagavad Gita is a ponderous holy scripture, and the purpose here is not to take us all through every verse of the Bhagavad Gita. The idea is to put the Bhagavad Gita into us in a manner that we are just practicing it all the time. Okay, so that's the purpose of this exercise. So, you know, like I said, to make it practical, to bring it to us, to increase the awareness of what we're supposed to do with it, you know, because in a lot of homes, the Bhagavad Gita is like a text, which is just kept in the mandir, which is fine because it is an important text. But I think the more important thing with the text is to read it, and a more important thing is to understand it and then to bring it into our life. So I hope that this will help us do that. Okay.